Go.
Welcome to Low Cornell. I have this great project that I want to share with you today, and I know that you can print the directions out and take it step by step that way, but I thought it might be a little bit more interesting for you to see the application of the brushes. So this is a little project that we're going to be using. It's on a little cigar box. You could actually paint it on just about anything. The inside is actually lined with scrapbooking paper. I haven't secured these in yet because I'm not sure that those really are the papers that I'm going to use, but you can find something that's compatible. Feel free to do this in any color selection that you like. I've added a little bit of jewel at the top to add a little bit of bling to it, and I've added these really great feet here by Tim Holtz. So we're going to get started on this project. I originally started by base coating the box using my glaze brush in just the baby blue color, and I'm just using acrylics on this by Deco Art. I based in the entire project inside and out with the baby blue, and then I applied my pattern. So if you downloaded the pattern, this is what you ended up getting. And when I go ahead and I transfer my pattern to my piece, rather than locking myself into the larger size of whatever it is that I need, I actually only put the smaller circles in and a single line for the commas and some of the other placement of items, just so that it makes it a little bit easier and I can make it kind of custom in my own, as wide or as thin as I need to make any of the strokes. So you're going to transfer that pattern to some tracing paper. And this is usually how I create my transfer. I just add lines rather than having the full size of whatever it is that's in there. So I've already transferred my pattern on here. And today I'm going to be using the new brushes here by Low Cornell, and I'm going to start with the Aura, and it's the 1/2 inch size, and it fits perfectly around the section of the flower that I'm doing over here. So you'll notice that there's actually 3 flowers on it. If you are doing a larger surface and you want to turn this into a floor cloth or something, you can add as many as you want by just developing the pattern. So since this pattern is exactly the same all the way around, I chose to just start with it this way. I've got the Aura. I also have my curved flat, and I have that in a number 10, and you'll notice that the numbers are right in here, and a number 6, so we're going to be using both of these. I also have my double filbert in a number 6, my Flora in a number 6, and then your favorite liner. And I like an 18-aught, especially for this project because it will work really well. I like the fatter handle on this one, but we also have an 18-aught in a skinnier handle, so you can use one of those as well. And then, of course, my trusty stylus, because I have some dots that I'm going to come in and I'm going to use as well. So I want to start with this border design that's in the front for a couple of different reasons. It will start you feeling the way that the brush is working for you, and it'll show you the consistency of paint that we're going to be using as well. So I'm going to take out my Flora, my number 6, and I'm going to wet it in my water bowl, and I'm going to thin my paint out, and I'm going to be using this lighter value right inside here, blue chiffon. So I'm going to be thinning that out, and I'm going to touch it on my paper towel to absorb some of that excess. I want it to flow for me, but I don't want it to be so soupy that it's going to bleed. And I'm just going to do it in this small section down here at the bottom, which is about the same width as I had on the box. And I'm going to hold my handle straight up and down, and I'm going to start on the tip of that and then just lay that brush down and sweep it back up. Put a little pressure on, bring it back up, put a little pressure, bring it back up. This is as easy as that stroke is, and you'll continue that all the way around the lid of your project. So that was pretty painless. Let's go on to have a little bit more fun. I'm going to take out my Aura, and again, I'm going to use the soupy consistency of the blue chiffon. Now, all of the painting that I have done on here, there is no white. It's all in blue chiffon, even though that it looks like it might be that way. And I have added just a little bit of water. So I wet my brush, and I'm going to pat it on my paper towel because I don't want it to be too soupy. But you'll notice that I have this open hole section on this Aura brush, which is what it is known for, and it's just going to be an impression. So it's pretty simple and easy. I'm just going to load into my color. I'm going to tap it on my paper towel, and then I'm going to use this circle as my guide. Now you may put in as many or as few petals as you would like. And this is the imprint. So I'm using the heel of the brush, touching that circle, and I'm just rotating this all the way around. So you notice that they're quite close, but they're all touching that circle, or at least trying to as I come around. And it's easier if you rotate that piece and then just hold that brush as you come all the way around. Now you may want to have less paint in there so that it's a little airier. It's totally up to you. And we get a little bit tight as we finish this back section over here. So that's the technique. Once I have that first one on there, I can go back and I can reload my brush and again touch it on my paper towel. You might want to wait for those to dry in between, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start my second layer. And all I'm doing is I'm looking for the point between the two petals here, and I'm just going to pop in another one. So it just kind of goes over those so that it looks like there's a delicate layer there. Again, I'm just going to sweep it all the way around as I work it. Just like that. So the whole thing is filled in. Now I know that on the pattern I put my lines in first, but I got so excited to show you the aura that I forgot that. So we're going to go back in and we're going to put that in right now while that's drying. Now I like to go ahead and I'll put in all of my curlicues, and I'm also going to put in the lines that are for my floral part on here. So you can put those in all at the same time if you want. If you want to wait and just get your curlicues in and then go ahead and put the others in when you're ready, you can. I'm just going to ink up my paint. I want it to be about the consistency of ink on my liner. And I'm just thinning that down. And then of course, I want to make sure that I don't have a little water bubble on there. So I'm going to wipe off my ferrule and I'm going to level out my load, which means I'm going to lay down my brush and lift it back up so that all of my hairs and my lines are all going to be the same thickness as I come around. Now you may find it more comfortable to come around a circle and end in the curlicue, or you could be an outie and you could take it the other direction. Depending on how your mind works, that's the way it's going to be easiest for you. So you just kind of have to decide. I'm actually just going to start from the center here and I'm going to carry this out. And remember that your lines are just a guide. So if you're not right exactly on those lines, you're going to be okay, because we're going to take that graphite line off after a bit. I'm also going to add the little line coming inside here. That's going to be a little fern that I'm going to have. These three lines right here are comma strokes, so I'm going to ignore those. But I also need to carry from my other flower. I'm going to drag this in. And the faster you go, the straighter your lines are. So work quickly when you're doing these. Otherwise, you get that shaky hand kind of getting interference inside there. And then this is going to be for the little daisies that I have coming in. So I'm going to drag that line in. Again, staying on the tip of my brush as I'm working. And then I have this curlicue up at the top. So if you are more comfortable, like I said, starting in the curl and carrying it around, I like to lay it down so I get a little bit of weight in there, and you can come back into that and clean that up so that I've got those lines in there to begin with. And that's looking pretty good. So now we need to let that dry for just a second. I see that I have missed one line right on this side over here, and that's going to be like the little seed, kind of like a lavender. It's easier to pull towards yourself than it is to pull away. So again, I'm going to come back into that original line so that that flows with it, and I'm going to carry that line out inside here. Okay, so that really wasn't the line I wanted. This is going to be my comma stroke line. And so I'll just wipe that one out. All right. So we're waiting for this other section here to dry. And while that one is drying, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take out our double filbert. And it's the number 6. And when you look at it, you'll see that it's got these two little points on it. I'm going to wet that brush. And I'm going to go into the section where those 3 little lines are together. So I am going to load that up. And I just have so much fun filling in with my flowers and stuff. And then I go back and I do my leaves and some of those other things. So if I feel like I'm out of the progression, it's okay. You guys don't have to always stay within the guidelines of the pattern. I'm just going to lay that down and lift it up. And you'll see that I get 2 little petals all at one time with that little lay down. And again, I am rotating the piece as I do it. You can put in as few or as many as you want in there. And you can see that they already look layered. And I'm just leaving a little bit of hole in for the center. So lay it down, lay it down, lay it down, lay it down, lay it down. And on that one, I didn't leave a little hole, but that's okay. We can change the way that these look every time we do them. And I don't like everything to look exactly the same. So I will leave a little bit of a hole on this one and put a couple fewer petals in there. And then I'm just going to wash that brush out and set it aside for just a minute. And I'm going to go back to my flora. And I have these, I call them pointy kind of stabby leaves. And it's the same ribbon stroke that I did in the very basic part of the beginning of the pattern. I'm just going to start on the tip of my brush and lay that down and bring that up so that I got a flower, or a leaf, I'm sorry. And if yours is bigger than mine, it's okay. If yours is littler than mine, it's like not a problem either. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, remember that your pattern is only a guide. You don't have to stay within the restraints of the size of that pattern at all. So I have those little guys in. Now on my flora, I also used it for the little seed flower that comes across this little edge over here. So I didn't water this down very much. I used it a little bit more full strength, but you'll see that I'm loading more the tip of the brush than the body of the brush. And what I'm going to do is you can use these to fill in and put in as many of these little seed flowers as you want. But I'm just laying them down and kind of filling this little section in here. And maybe just kind of tap in a couple of little ones that are growing down here at the bottom. And that kind of fills that out and fills that area in for you. With that brush again, I also had the little fern that's coming in off of this side. And we've laid the brush down this direction, and now we're going to do the same kind of lay down, only I'm pushing away from myself. So I'm going to load into it, and I'm going to lay my brush down and lift it up, and I'm going to get sort of a ragged little fern-like look as I come away from there. Now at this point, I want to do a little bit of shading before I get too crazy into some of the next sections, especially when I get into my commas. You can do all of your shading at one time if you prefer to wait, or you can put your shading in at this point. I'm going to start with the ribbon, and the color that I'm using on that is Wedgwood Blue. Now on a side load, I'm going to go and I'm going to use my curved flat, and I'm going to use my number 10 on this one. And I wet it, and I pat on my paper towel on both sides, and I wipe off my ferrule, and I scoop a little paint on the tip of my brush and blend it nicely on my palette. Now I want this to be quite light, so I'm going to continue to blend it until it really is worked well into my brush and that I've worked that water into my brush as well. On my little curly cues, you have a choice there. Now this is your own creative license and the way that you want to do it. I did shading on a portion of one side and then on the inside. If you want to shade one side of the whole thing, that's acceptable. It's not going to be a problem for you. If you need to erase out or lighten your lines, you can erase them at this point because you're not going to need them anymore, especially on the curly cues. I'm going to come in and I'm just going to side load inside here so that I can bring that color out just a little bit. And you'll see that I've come off to the chisel part of my brush, and I'm just going to kind of let that settle for just a minute. And you can take it from the other side when I talked about doing one side and the other, and I just feather that off so that it's almost at the same size as that other one. So when it ends there, I want the other one to end there. Just softly blend it out. And then I'm going to load again, and each time I wash out my brush and I start all over again and I get my blending back into my brush. And I'm going to do the same thing on this little curl. If it's easier for you to pull towards yourself, that's fine. I just want to make sure that you can actually see what I'm doing. So I'm trying to keep my hand out of the way by going that other direction. So I've come in on that side. Again, I'm going to start chiseling in off of that other side and carry it around. And if I need to stop and move my piece, I'm able to easily do that. And I can just continue that around. And all I'm trying to do is just add a little bit of dimension to that curl. So you don't have to get real crazy with it, just add a little bit of color in there. And I want to bring my leaves forward a little bit. So you may either shade all the way around or on one side of these little pointed leaves by getting your side load in. And then I'm just going to come across that other side as well. That really brings that away from that background and keeps that really nice and soft. I'm going to do the same thing to the other leaf on the other side. And while that's drying for just a minute, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just tap into the lavender and then to the lines that I have on here, because I want to bring those away from the background as well. So I'm going to just touch against here, and if I need to come back and strengthen these lines later, I can. And then I'm going to touch around these little guys, and I'm not being very particular. All I'm doing is adding just a little cursory bit of color in there. I'm going to do the same thing to the other lines on this section over here, and this kind of will clean up a little bit of your edges if they're not as clean as you want them to be. And if you get it on your flowers, you want to keep those kind of clean, so you just use the clean side of your brush to kind of clean that up a little bit. I also have the little seed flowers in here, and I don't want to have a ton of color in there, so I am keeping this quite soft as I'm laying that in. Okay, so we've mastered that part of it. That's looking pretty sweet. I want to put in a little dip in the center of my my little daisy flowers. So in order to give the illusion of that having a center left open, I'm just going to put a little bit of a C stroke in there. We'll make that one a little bit deeper. And then I'm also going to shade, and I want this to be kind of wide, so I'm going to walk that color out. I'm going to shade inside those first flowers that I put down and outside that circle. So that's actually going to go on your petals. And this makes that jewel stand out just a little bit more, and I add some funky little dots around it later, so it gives them an opportunity to be pulled away from that background as well. So you're just going to make your way all the way around. And you're working on 3 flowers all at one time. Don't, just work one and then start the whole thing all over again. You guys can knock this box out pretty quickly. While that's drying, I am going to come and do the ribbon that I have on the border. And again, that's a really easy side load. I'm going to take and I'm just going to go underneath. I kind of went off the edge there. Underneath here, putting a little bit of pressure inside there as I lay it down. If it ends up getting a little bit too soft, you'll probably have to put one more side load in there, or even just deepen the deepest crevices. So you could just come back into there. Deepen that maybe just a little bit more. And I like to keep it consistent, so you might have to come back in and deepen a little of that too. So that looks pretty good. I am going to shade around the larger flower, and that brings that away from that background as well. So this one, it's kind of a hit and miss. You're not going to use a real perfect side load. I'm just tapping in because I want to keep that looking a little bit lacy and ragged. So I'm just punching down a little bit of paint around the outside. Again, it's easier to rotate that piece than it is to try to angle your wrist as you're coming around. So keep that handle up so that you're not getting a really wide side load. I just really want a bit of color in that background. And if you wanted to be super fancy, you could actually come in and shade inside those that flower area. But I was looking for something quick and easy, so I really didn't do that. This would be gorgeous on a black background. It would be beautiful in red or gold or green. The possibilities are pretty endless on this. So we're developing this pretty well. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take out our curve flat, and we're going to use this to pop in our comma strokes. So comma strokes, this is just a little lay down, lift up, angle it up kind of stroke. I am going to keep the curved portion of my brush to the top, and I'm just going to load that with a little bit of thinned paint. I left a little bit of water in my brush. I don't want to have that water bubble in there messing with me though. And I'm loading it almost to the ferrule so that I have that paint that will carry me out. So if you're not a really great comma maker, or you're worried about only having those little lines on there for placement, you might want to start with the one in the middle, and then you can place the other two above and below, and that's probably the easiest way to do it. The one in the middle on this right side, or on this left side here, is the longest. So I'm going to keep my brush handle straight up and down. I'm going to lay my hairs down flat, and then I'm gradually going to lift that tip up so that it comes to a point. I do load for each one of them because I want the paint to be full strength, and so you want to make sure that you're wiping off after each one as well. I'm going to start with this bottom one, lay it down, come back up on your chisel again, and it makes a really nice comma stroke for you. And then one up at the top. So you'll see that I kind of use those lines for where the placement should be, but I didn't necessarily have to stay right exactly on top of them. This is your project, so you don't have to be too crazy about, you know, staying right exactly where I had the pattern for you. Just use a little bit of your free will there. On this other side, the top one was again the largest. So I'm going to keep again the rounded part to the top, but now I'm pulling towards myself. And so sometimes it depends on what kind of right brain or left brain you are, which side is easier to pull towards you. We all have a direction that makes it a little bit easier. These are quite simple. I'm just laying it down and coming back up on my tip. And I have the 3. And you can kind of fill in, add any other comma strokes or any extra added fun that you want to put in on these. We're going to let those dry for just a minute, and I'm going to give you one fun little thing to do that I did not include in the directions, so that those of you who are actually watching this online, you get an extra little fun thing to add to your pattern that no one else gets. I'm going to just thin down my paint so it's about the consistency of ink. I'm using my 18-aught liner, and I'm just going to embellish these leaves by adding some little lines. You don't really notice them, but it does add just one more little technique and kind of fun look inside there. I'm going to flip that around, and I'm going to do the same thing. And again, it's just like a little angled line coming across on there. So that makes that kind of fun. There are some simple little filler leaves that I've stuck around in some places that I use the number 6, and I am keeping my paint very soupy because I want these to be almost transparent. Maybe I'll have a little extra paint in there so that I could actually show you, so you'll see where they are. I just filled in, just laying them down so that they get just a little tiny bit smaller as I move away from that, and I put it in here. So one side, other side. See how quick and easy those little leaves are. They almost make themselves. You could maybe add a couple here at the top. This is just stuff that I kind of throw in extra little detail just to brighten that up and make it look just a little bit more detailed. I've been waiting for this top section to dry, and I'm going to go right back into my curved flat, my number 10 that I did my shading with. And I'm going to load it in a side load. Had I tried to do all of my side loading at one time, once I picked up this bottom and then came back, the clean side of my brush would have wiped out that original side load that I put in there. So I do it in 2 steps. I do it one time, and then I let it dry, and then I come back and I'll pick up this other side. So I want to make sure that it just kind of folds into that other one, and I can walk that color out so that it's quite full. That way, if you don't place your jewel exactly where you think it should be, you're going to have some room in there to make that show up a little bit more. And I look at my piece, and I know that I have these other side loads that I'm going to be doing on this side over here, but this little curve right here, it looks kind of sad. It looks like maybe it needs to be brought from the background a little bit. So I can do that with a side load next to that line right there, and see how that kind of perks him up just a little bit. Or I can brighten that up with my liner. So if you just go back into your original color, and in some places on that line to add a little bit of interest, you can just drag a little highlighted color, like in these roundy kind of areas here. And that adds a little bit of interest and a little dimension and some highlight. inside there. You could do the same thing with your stems. So on these little comma strokes right in here, you have the opportunity to either shade completely around them, which I think might be a little bit of overkill, but you could do it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to shade the bottom side because I'm going to embellish that with some dots that I really want to show. And so if I have that base down first, you'll see how that pops those out just a little bit more. They're quite close in here, so I'm just going to start at the base here, and I'm not going to worry about if it gets a little bit of shading on the one underneath. Just use the clean side of your brush there to soften that out. I'm going to carry that in, and then I'll come back into here. That really makes it pull away from the background. So don't be afraid of shading. I mean, if you are a little bit worried about it, you could practice it on your palette so that you feel a little bit more comfortable with it. This curved flat seems to make it really easy to do walkout blends and your side loads because you don't have that extra hair interfering with you like you would on a slant or on just a regular flat brush. I'm going to carry my color in on each section and then clean that up. Just a little tiny bit like that. I have added, and this is just to break my edges, I've added a line that goes around, and you don't have to be very particular about it. You don't have to put a pattern on or be, very, very even with the lines that you put in. And what this does is it just adds a little bit more closure to the box. So I just took my liner brush and I'm just going to dot, and I'm just going to add some lines. And you'll see I have not measured this out. I'm just kind of using an eyeball here to drag this line in. And again, it could be thick and thin lines. All the way around, pretend that I'm just coming around the whole box. Hopefully on yours you didn't get so close to the edge there like I did. Kind of just dragging it around. Well then, of course, if you chose to do this, I would not just let you get away with having it. I would make you shade it. So we're going to go back in and we're going to side load next to that. So I'll go ahead and I'll load my brush in a side load. And again, I'm using that curved flat. But I don't want to have a great deal of width on that. So I'm not going to press my brush down so flat in there. I'm going to kind of keep it more on the chisel. And I'm going to lay that down so that it gives me a little bit of movement in there. Kind of closes that section in, shows that line off a little bit better. It's these added extra little goods that really make this piece special. I did think that it would be fun to take this same pattern and do it on the inside of the box. So if you are loving this pattern or want to be a little bit more ambitious, feel free to do that. Or just take one of the flowers and put it like on the inside. Okay, so we got that part of it done. Now the favorite part is the dots. So I'm going to take out my stylus, and I like to squeeze out fresh paint. Fresh paint makes the best dots. So if you find that you have dots that are just like a little bit smashed or hardened or not so round, if you use fresh paint every time, you'll always have a really great dot. And I'm going to start at the top because I have a tendency, and we all do, to drag our hand through our dots once we get those in. So I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to progress down as I'm working. So I'm going to start on this very first top curlicue, and I'm just going to pop a little dot in there, and then I'm going to do a progression of dots, which means that I'm going to dot, 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 dot without redipping. And I just let that run out as long as it needs to. I'm going to wipe off on my paper towel so that I'm able to have fresh dots and a good dot again on there. And I'm going to dance around on my flower on that center. So wherever that little center shading was, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to dance as many dots as I want in there. And you might want to put your jewel down so that you know how big your center needs to be if you didn't get the exact same size or couldn't find the size that I used in there. And that will be okay. It will still look quite beautiful. I'm going to top these little center dots inside there, and then I'm going to flip this upside down. And again, I'm doing a progression of dots, which means that I'm going to dot and let them get smaller. I'm going to wipe it off on my paper towel each time. And again, it depends on how many dots you want to have filled in there. And I keep it quite close. I don't cover the comma stroke, but I get it quite close to the comma. See how quickly that dries too when I'm using the acrylics as a wash or as thinned down. That makes this project so fast. I've got it inside there, and then I've got my little curly Q here. And if you want to add additional dots anywhere else, feel free to do that. There's no right or wrong on those. I am going to take the bottom of my number 6 curve flat because I like the size of it for the dots that go around on your edging. I'm just going to dip and dot. So I'll dip and dot, which means they're going to be the same size. As you're working around the whole box, you're going to want to wipe it off on your paper towel just to be sure that the dot sizes remain the same because you'll get some buildup of paint in there. At this point, I would take a look at my pattern and I would make sure that it looked like I wanted it to. If I needed to add a little bit more strength in some of my side loads, I'd go back and I'd do that. If I wanted to add some more embellishments or dots, I would do that as well. So that's where you want to make that decision. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to varnish the piece. So you're going to use the yellow handled wash brush is what I call it, and that's our 3/4 flat glaze. And I applied several coats of the varnish on, letting them dry between each coat and lightly sanding. Then I put the paper on the inside and then added some glue to the back sides of my little feet and glued those on and held them tight. I did remove all of the hardware as you saw in the pattern. I did remove all of the hardware from the front clasp and the back before I painted it because it just makes it a little bit easier. And I just used some white glue on the back of on my little jewels, and then I just placed them in here. So I did all of that after the varnishing was done because it's quite difficult to varnish when you have all the other pieces on the top of it. So I hope you've enjoyed our free pattern and our opportunity to use our new brushes here at Low Cornell. Thanks so much for joining me.